Okay, so this is Bible study for Genesis chapter 35. And the text says, Then God said to Jacob, Go up to Bethel and settle there, and build an altar there to God, who appeared to you when you were fleeing from your brother Esau. So Jacob said to his household and all who were with him, Get rid of the foreign gods you have with you, and purify yourselves, and change your clothes. Then come, let us go up to Bethel, where I will build an altar to God, who answered me in the day of my distress, and who has been with me wherever I have gone. So they gave Jacob all the foreign gods they had, and the rings in their ears, and Jacob buried them under the oak at Shechem. Then they set out, and the terror of God fell on the towns all around them, so that no one pursued them. Jacob and all the people with him came to Luz, that is Bethel, in the land of Canaan. There he built an altar, and he called the place El Bethel, because it was there that God revealed himself to him when he was fleeing from his brother. Now Deborah, Rebekah's nurse, died and was buried under the oak outside Bethel. So it was named Allon-Bacuth, which means oak of weeping. After Jacob returned from Paddan Aram, God appeared to him again and blessed him. God said to him, Your name is Jacob, but you will no longer be called Jacob. Your name will be Israel. So he named him Israel. And God said to him, I am God Almighty. Be fruitful and increase in number. A nation and a community of nations will come out of you, and kings will be among your descendants. The land I gave to Abraham and Isaac, I also give to you, and I will give this land to your descendants after you. Then God went up from him at that place where he had talked with him. Jacob set up a stone pillar at the place where God had talked to him, and poured out a drink offering. He also poured oil on it. Jacob called the place where God had talked to him Bethel. Then they moved on from Bethel. While they were still some distance from Ephrath, Rachel began to give birth and had great difficulty. And as she was having great difficulty in childbirth, the midwife said to her, Don't despair, for you have another son. As she breathed her last, for she was dying, she named her son Ben-Oni, but his father named him Benjamin. So Rachel died and was buried on the way to Ephrath, that is Bethlehem. Over her tomb Jacob set up a pillar, and to this day the pillar marks Rachel's tomb. Israel moved on again and pitched his tent beyond Migdal Eder. While Israel was living in that region, Reuben went in and slept with his father's concubine Bilhah, and Israel heard of it. Jacob had 12 sons, the sons of Leah, Reuben the firstborn of Jacob, Simeon, Levi, Judah, Issachar, and Zebulun. The sons of Rachel, Joseph and Benjamin. The sons of Rachel's servant Bilhah, Dan and Naphtali. The sons of Leah's servant Zilpah, Gad and Asher. These are the sons of Jacob, who were born to him in Paddan Aram. Jacob came home to his father Isaac in Mamre, near Kiriath Arba, that is Hebron, where Abraham and Isaac had stayed. Isaac lived 180 years. Then he breathed his last and was gathered to his people, old and full of years. And his sons Esau and Jacob buried him. All right, so there's a lot going on in this text, and we're trying to focus on the stories of the people, and there seems to be a significant story here. We're not focusing on the chapters or texts in Genesis that seem to be more geared towards telling us the genealogy, although Sometimes it's mixed in with the story. So we're kind of going to be skipping some time here and a chapter after this Bible study. But we're trying to sort of pull in all of this chapter with this Bible study. So number one says, what happened in last week's Bible study? A, I don't want to talk about it, which may very well be true. You may not want to go back to the things that happened in this last text. B, Shechem raped Dinah, and they tried to get her, and he then tried to get her as his wife. That happened. C, Dinah's brothers convinced Shechem and everyone in their town to be circumcised, and then they would all intermarry, but they did it deceitfully. D, while they were still in pain from the circumcision, Simeon and Levi came in and killed all the men, and then the brothers all carried off their belongings, flocks and women and children as plunder. That's true. Jacob told them that they brought trouble on him by making him obnoxious to the Canaanites and Perizzites. And that's kind of the way we closed the text from last week. Number two, what happened next according to 35:1? God said to Jacob. So the key is, in last week's study, we pointed out sort of the conspicuous absence of God. Now, I don't know if that was intentional by the author when they put this together, that there were some places where God seemed absent in what was going on, and so God was not mentioned. It's also possible that when perhaps Moses was gathering these stories to pass on to Israel when they were entering the promised land, that he was pulling from different sources, and some of those sources told the account more historically without sort of the personal element and the private times when Jacob did seek God or those around him did seek God. And then other stories were sort of immersed in God's presence as a key to how somebody had told the story. And so maybe if Moses was sort of an editor of these stories that were probably largely oral tradition prior to that, um, then he might have been pulling in stories from different storytellers with different purposes. Um, and that may explain the absence of God's, of stories about prayer or the people of God going to God versus others that included that. It's hard to say really, but what we can say is that this story is geared towards God's interaction with Jacob, and I don't know that we can interpret God wants them in Bethel, because honestly in this story they go to Bethel, but then they move around some afterwards, and it doesn't say God didn't want them to. So, we might have said, well, they should have never been in Shechem to begin with, and that's why all this trouble came on them. But I'm not sure that we can say that for sure. Um, we may say that if it was us, we might wish we never went to Shechem. We might even say that because of what happened in Shechem, Jacob needed to move on because of that statement at the end of the text where Jacob says, "You've made me obnoxious to the people around me." He said, well, we really need to move on then. But ultimately, we see God here, and he says, go to Bethel and settle there and build an altar. So God said to Jacob, B, God said to Jacob, go up to Bethel and settle there and build an altar there to God, yes. And then C, God told him not to forget about the God who appeared to him while he was fleeing Esau when he had nothing to his name. Now, God doesn't say this. This is not a quote like B is. But essentially, God's reminding him, remember, Bethel is where I appeared to you. Um, so God seems to be trying to get him to remember Perhaps because Jacob has been doing a lot of things in his own strength and his own wisdom, and God's trying to give him a reset and say, you see what happens when you do things in your own strength and your own wisdom. Now come back to Bethel and let's restart by you recognizing what I did for you then and how I appeared to you and what I said to you. And now let's start again with this as your basis. Now, I think that is a reasonable thing to sort of interpret from this text and how it follows the last text. Um, so number 3, what according to 35, 2 and 3 did Jacob do? A, he told his whole household, get rid of the foreign gods you have with you and purify yourselves and change your clothes. Um, so I was thinking about this when I read this, and I'm like, there it is. I've been wondering why everybody is so bothered when we don't wear our Sunday best. You know, why the older generation, the older folks, are so upset when we show up to church in jeans because thus saith the Lord, change your clothes. But I don't think that's a proper. I don't. First of all, I don't think they've thought that deeply about it. Second of all, I don't think that's a proper interpretation of this. Um, Although it could be symbolic, even today, that if we put on new clothes, um, that we are being renewed. But basically, he's saying, let's get rid of the old. And much like Paul says in the New Testament, the old is gone, the new has come. You're a new creation. Um, you know, putting on fresh clothes, putting on nice clothes, worthy of sort of going up to God in worship, can be symbolic, but he's really talking about your entire appearance, your entire life, your outward appearance should reflect what God is doing inside of you, and so that's the significance, I think, of that. And the what is God doing inside of them? They are repenting. They are getting rid of foreign gods that they've held on to for who knows why. You know, maybe it was just plunder and they were valuable or whatever, but probably as they've taken plunder or as they've received these for whatever reason, they've held on to them as if they hold some special power. And the focus is to be on God, and these gods have no power, so get rid of these foreign gods. Um, and purify yourself. We're going to go up to the God, the one God who appeared to me, and we're going to worship him, and we're going to build an altar to him. B, he told them to come with him to Bethel, where he would build an altar to God, who answered me in the day of my distress, and who has been with me wherever I've gone. So now, Jacob is taking what God says to him, and God is reminding him. Now he's passing that on to his children, what I think is valuable. We've been doing this multi-quip meeting about once a month, and one of our focuses has been to talk about how do we pass on what God has done in us, what inspired us before God even was working in us when we look to those that came before us. Now, what does he want to do in sort of the next generation, both meaning our children and those who come to Christ under our ministry? You know, how are we showing them how God has interacted with us? And he says, we're going to build an altar to God who answered me in my day of my distress and who has been with me wherever I've gone. So God was there when I was running. I had nothing to my name. I had no place to call home, and he has given me all of this. So we're going to go worship him. Number 4, what happened next according to 35, 4 through 7? They gave Jacob all their foreign gods they had and the rings in their ears, which had a significance. And Um, Jacob buried them under the oak at Shechem. So it's interesting because in the next section, Jacob also buries uh, Rachel under an oak, not at Shechem, at Bethel, but um, we think, well, why did he bury them instead of destroy them? Maybe he should have burned them. I don't know if they would have burned. But the significance of burying them under an oak is that's the same thing he does for somebody that he loves, but has died. These have been put to death. These are done, and so he buries them. Then they set out, and the terror of God fell on all the towns around them, so no one pursued them. So interestingly, I wonder what would have happened if they'd have kept their foreign gods with them. Jacob is worried at the end of the previous text about what the other towns are going to do to them now that they have found out, that they were willing to wipe out an entire town. So he's worried about that, but nothing happens to them as they go. And so we see God's protection on them, likely because they have got rid of all their other gods and they are going to worship God. And so God's presence is with them. And therefore, none of the other towns come out. And I think that's an important thing because we want God's protection this way on us. But I wonder if we don't experience God's protection on us in this way because we've held on to our idols and they're still with us. But in this case, Jacob and his family have gotten rid of them, and as they go up, it's the presence of God that protects them. And then Jacob built an altar at Bethel. Number 5. What do we learn in 35, 9 through 13 happened next? A, God appeared to Jacob again and blessed him. So what's interesting about this text is what we have happening is basically what happened when he was there the first time all by himself. So God spoke to him, God encountered him, God blessed him, God renamed him Israel. Perhaps this is a reaffirmation of what has already been done at this place. God's blessing was to be fruitful and increase in number. A nation and a community of nations will come from you, and kings will be among your descendants. Yes. D, the land I gave to Abraham and Isaac, I also give to you. I will give this land to your descendants after you. And then E, God went up from him at that place where he talked with them. So I will say, God has the same promise for us no matter what. I don't know if this has happened to you where God has promised you something, but you have wandered off and done things your own way. And when you come back to the place where you met God, and I'm not talking of a physical place, but you come back in your heart and in your mind and your spirit to the place where you're ready to honor God again, God gives you the same promise he gave you at first. So we talk about the faithfulness of God, and yet we talk about the fact that when we go our own way, do things our own way, the promises of God are not necessary. God's protection is not necessarily on us. He's not necessarily watching over us in the same way that he was when we were serving him. We think, well, then was his promise no good? Is he unfaithful? No, God is faithful. His promise is right there for the taking. But when we wander off, we say, I'm not interested in your promise. I'm not interested in your plan. But when we come back, it's still there. And that's what happened in my life. God called me to ministry as a young child in 5th grade. But I went my own way and did things my own way. But when I came back, it wasn't very long after I'd made a commitment to Christ where I started hearing the same promise renewed once again. And so that's what's going on with Jacob. And I wondered as I read this, whether somebody got confused when they were writing it, whether somebody told the story and sort of conflated. Did he set up the pillar and pour oil on it before, or did he do that now? Um, was the story sort of so far in the future told that they know oil was poured on it, and they know it was poured on it because that's where God met with him, but they don't know if it was poured on it when he first encountered God there or later. That was something that came through my mind. Is this, are they confused? Are the storytellers confused and two people told the story a different way and Moses sort of brought it all into one? Or is it possible that the things that, see, God says you're Israel. Notice God said he was Israel before, but we've still been calling him Jacob. God says he's Israel now, and now at the end of this text, it says, and Israel heard of it. Israel moved again. And so now we have the storyteller, the author of this book, calling him Israel from here on out. He was renamed Israel before, but he wasn't called Israel until now. And part of me says God encountered him, but he was still doing things very much his own way. But when he came back here, he made a commitment, not only him, but all of his people, all of his family, and those connected with him, to follow God in a new way. Give me just a moment. I'm having a lot of congestion. Had to get some nasal spray, see if I can get this fixed so I can finish the Bible study here. I have a sinus infection that I've been fighting, taking antibiotics. Number 7. What happened in 35:16 through 19? Um, oh, I didn't do number 6. What happened in 35:14? Jacob set up a stone pillar at the place where God had talked to him and poured out a drink offering on it. He also poured oil on it. So he commemorated this once again. Number 7, what happened in 35:16 through 19? Then they moved on from Bethel. So I don't think this happened the next day because God called them to settle in Bethel. And I don't think they just said, okay, we'll settle there for a day, build an altar, and then we're done, we're going to move on. So we need to understand that time passes. They have settled here, but there's a time, over time, that they decide to move on. But still within the place where God had designated that he had given to his family. So what happened in 35:16 through 19? Rachel began to give birth with great difficulty. And yes. B, as she gave birth, she breathed her last. And then C, Rachel named the son Ben-Oni, which means son of my trouble. But Jacob named him Benjamin, which is son of my right hand. So, obviously Rachel, as she's breathing her last, she's had great difficulty in childbirth. She says he's the son of my trouble. But but Jacob, who loved Rachel deeply, now has another son from Rachel, and he calls her son of my right hand. Now this is important. One, it's a moment in the story that I think we shouldn't skip over, so we're dealing with it, despite it seeming sort of extraneous to this time in Bethel. But another thing is, when we get to 37 and we start the story of Joseph, this is significant because why does Jacob not want to send Benjamin? I'm getting ahead of myself, but the sons go and find Joseph, and they come back and say, so this man in Egypt wants Benjamin to come, and And Jacob says, no, I'm not sending Benjamin. I've already lost Joseph. He's got two sons from Rachel, the woman that he loved. Leah, he's got a bunch of sons. The two maidservants that he was given, he's got a bunch of sons. But Rachel was the one that he served for 7 years for, and then ultimately had to serve another 7 years for. And it seemed like no time at all because he loved her. And so he's got two sons from Rachel, and by the time that story comes along, Joseph is gone and presumed dead. And he's not sending Benjamin. Benjamin is the son of his right hand. Benjamin is his most valued son. Number 8, what else happened? Reuben went in and slept with his father's concubine, Bilhah. So it's one thing to say father's concubine, and I think Absalom did that in the story of David in 1st and 2nd Samuel. So not good, not that's disrespectful. But maybe even worse, this was the mother of his brothers, Dan and Naphtali. So remember that this concubine was the maidservant of Rachel. So Reuben is Leah's firstborn, and Bilhah is the maidservant of Rachel, and so the oldest son goes in and sleeps with essentially one of his father's wives, who was the mother of his brothers. And it says Israel heard of it, but he didn't seem to do anything about it here. Now, I that troubled me because it said Israel heard of it, and I was like, what was he going to do? Until we find him dealing with it in Genesis. So in Genesis 49, he blesses his children. And in the blessing, he says this to Reuben. He says, Reuben, you are my firstborn, my might, the first sign of my strength, excelling in honor, excelling in power. Turbulent as the waters, you will no longer excel, for you went up onto your father's bed, onto my couch, and defiled it. So when it comes time for him to bless his sons, the blessing he gives Reuben is you've excelled and been my strength as my firstborn, but you will no longer excel because of what you did defiling my bed, my couch. By the way, he also deals with Simeon and Levi, the two brothers of Dinah who killed everyone in Shechem. And that's in the next verses. Simeon and Levi are brothers. Their swords are weapons of violence. Let me not enter their council. Let me not join their assembly, for they have killed men in their anger and hamstrung oxen as they pleased. Cursed be their anger, so fierce, and their fury so cruel. I will scatter them in Jacob and disperse them in Israel. So he basically says they're not going to have the inheritance in the way others will, because of I'm going to sort of spread them out because of their sword, and we see that was reflected in what they did in the last chapter in 34. Then we learn that Isaac died at the age of 180, and Jacob and Esau buried them. So we're moving forward. Isaac's story is done. Jacob's story and his children, we're learning enough about to sort of have context for chapter 37 and our understanding of what happens. So this is a text, as I see it, that's sort of summarizing and launching us forward, setting the stage for the rest of the story.